Hey everybody, this is Richard Chansey. Welcome to the John Maxwell Leadership Podcast. In this episode, we're giving you a preview of John's online course, The 15 Laws of Growth. You're about to hear the first module from that course on the law of intentionality. As always, we want to give you a free resource to help you grow as a leader and to impact the leaders around you. So this week, instead of a fill-in-the-blank worksheet, we're giving you a full video to this lesson. All you need to do is visit maxwellpodcast.com/intention and click the bonus resource button. We've also got a special deal on John's online course just for our podcast listeners. So be sure to stay for the second half of this episode where Mark Cole and I deep dive into John's lesson, and we'll share that deal with you. Now, here's Dr. John C. Maxwell.
I'm delighted today to talk to you about some of the laws of leadership. And the first one I want to talk to you about is truly the first one I should talk to you about. Now, there are 15 of them, but you have to understand there's one that I think is foundational for the other 14. Not more important, but foundational, and that's the law of intentionality. And that's where we're going to begin today. The law of intentionality just basically says growth is the only guarantee that tomorrow is going to get better. Oh, isn't that good? If you're going to grow, and if I'm going to grow, we're going to grow intentionally. Now, I'm talking to leaders today. I love talking to people that lead many people. And to be honest with you, if I could just literally come off the stage and I could get real close to you and we could have kind of like a one-on-one conversation. There are two questions that I would ask you, and the two questions I'm about to ask you will really determine how successful you're going to be in this business, without any question. These are the two questions. It's not like there's 3 or there's 4 or there's 7. There's 2, okay? Just trust me on this. I'm an old man. I know this. I've been around the block a few times. And there are 2 questions that if you can answer in a positive way about yourself, you're going to be very successful. And if you really cannot answer that in a positive way, to be honest with you, you're not going to be near as successful as you would like to be. The first question is very simple. What are you doing to develop yourself? And if you'd say, my gosh, John, I'll tell you right now, I'm doing a lot to develop myself. I've got a personal growth plan, and I'm intentional in this, and I'm doing this on a daily deal. If you could say that to me, then I'd say, hey, we're in good shape here. We're in good shape, because that's the key. You know, what are you doing to develop yourself? And by the way, the reason that's first is not because you want to be selfish. It's kind of like almost a selfish question. The person says, well, why do I start with myself? The reason you start with yourself is because you cannot give what you do not have. So you better start with yourself. Because if you're leading others and have nothing to give them, nothing to share with them, nothing to teach them, then I can promise you, you'll never be what you want to be as a leader. And I can promise you that after 40 years of personal growth, the secret of any success, if I've had any success at all, the secret of that success has been personal growth in my life. And growth has literally placed me where I am. So what are you doing to develop yourself? It's a huge question. And the 15 laws of the 15 laws of personal growth, basically these laws are all about developing yourself and developing the second question, what are you doing to develop others? You see, on the first question, you're foundational for your future. The second question is all about compounding, multiplication. That's where you build a huge business, when you know how to develop other people. And what we have to understand about the law of intentionality is that you cannot develop yourself and you cannot develop your people unless you're intentional. And I discovered that in my 20s when I sat down and had breakfast with a guy named Kirk Campmeyer at the Holiday Inn in Lancaster, Ohio, and he asked me the question, John, do you have a plan for personal growth in your life? Didn't have a plan. Didn't know I was supposed to have a plan. Nobody ever told me I was supposed to have a plan. I graduated. I was working hard, doing my very best to reach my potential. But nobody ever walked in my life until Kirk Campmeyer did and said, John, do you have a plan for personal growth in your life? And I didn't have one. I was embarrassed. I thought back then I had to have answers. And so I acted as if I did, and that didn't really work very long. I was kind of like a plane circling an airfield trying to come in for a landing. Found I just shut up and landed that plane. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget, he said, "You don't have a plan, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't have a plan." And then he said to me, "John, growth is not automatic. If you're going to have to grow, you're going to have to grow on purpose." That day, my life was changed. What Kurt was saying is, if you're going to grow, you have to be intentional. I mean, it starts with me. So look at the person you're seated beside and just say to them, this will kind of be like a get acquainted time with him. Just look at him and say, "You really need to improve." Go ahead and tell me that, right? You really need. Now, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that fun? Isn't it fun to just look at somebody and say, "You know what, you really need to improve"? Yeah, it just rolls naturally off the tongue. Now look right back at him and say, "I need to improve." Now you said that with a lot less enthusiasm. I mean, did you hear that? I mean, when I said, tell the other person you need to improve, I mean, it was loud. "You need to improve." Yeah, well, yeah. I need to improve. Yeah, I need to improve. Now, the problem is we have what I call growth gaps. The reason that we're not intentional in our growing is there are just some gaps that keep us from getting to where we need to go. And I'm going to give you about a half a dozen of them really quickly. The first one is the assumption gap. And the assumption gap just basically says, I assume that I'll grow automatically. You see, most people, they live by assumption. 99% of people today are just assuming, that somehow they'll get better. Very sad, folks, very sad. Because let me tell you something about assumption. Assumption is a huge disappointment in life. You show me a person that assumes, and I'll show you a person that almost daily is disappointed. So the first gap is a gap that leaves many people short, and that's just the pure assumption gap. The second one is the knowledge gap. And the knowledge gap is basically, I don't know how to grow. And we've all been there. In other words, okay, I know that I need to be intentional in my growth, but I really don't know how to grow. I've been there. Now, I brought something with me today that's very special. It's a kit, and I'm just so pleased to have this because this kit is very important to me. Now it cost me $799, and I got this kit. I got this kit back in the 1970s. Okay, and this was my first personal growth kit. It's Dynamics of Personal Goal Setting by Paul Meyer, Personal Success Planner, and I was so excited. It cost $799. Now you have to understand, I made about $800 a month. So get the picture. It took me 6 months to buy this kit. I saved up. We didn't have credit cards back then, and I just saved up and worked hard, and it took me 6 months before I had enough cash to buy this kit. And I was so excited when I got it, and I mean, I opened it all up, and this is just amazing. You'll just see some things here that just crack you up. It had, for some of you young people who've never seen this before, they're called cassette tapes. And I remember taking the first cassette tape out, putting it on my little cassette player, opening this up. Oh my gosh, this was so wonderful. They had page by page plans. I go through the plans and listen to the tapes and go through the plans, listen to the tape, go to the plans, listen to the tape. This was my first growth experience. And the ROI on this $799 kit, it's worth millions of dollars to me. Yeah, you heard me right. Millions of dollars. And experiences and a lifetime of growth. And what's interesting is, now here's what I want you to hear. The value of this kit, the content was good, but that wasn't the value. The content was good. But as I look back now, I say, what made this so special? What made this so special is very simple. This is the kit that got me started. Hear me out. The value of what you do for people is not so much what you give to them as much as it challenges them to get started. Getting started is absolutely the key to life. And by the time I finished going through this personal growth kit, by the time that was all finished, I had 6 months of day in, day out, personal growth. And what it did is it developed a habit in my life. And by the time I finished with that kit, now I'm used to spending time every day in personal growth. It got me started. I mean, this is worth this whole lesson if you can just get this. The reason I'm so passionate about personal growth is personal growth keeps me prepared. In other words, if I'm continually growing, I continue developing myself, and I'm continually learning, and I'm continually doing new things and going to another step higher, can I tell you what that is? That constant growth is the preparation for the opportunity. So when the opportunity comes, here's the way. You don't go into an opportunity, you grow into an opportunity. And so I'm passionate about personal growth because for that person who says, wow, I had an opportunity, I wasn't ready. If you're growing, you're always ready. Because after I intentionally started growing, I made a commitment to grow as a leader. I started writing, I became an author. I developed growth resources for other people. I founded my first company. I began training conferences. Everything I can think of that has ever been good in my life was a result of the fact that I started personal growth in my life. I know I'm known for leadership. I understand that. But my passion in life, more than anything else, is personal growth. Because if you grow personally, you can be a great leader. But if you don't grow personally, you can't be a good leader. Everything in life that you're ever going to want is based upon your ability to develop yourself. So Kurt Kampmeyer said, John, you can't just accidentally grow. You got to grow on purpose. And so I started. And I got to thinking yesterday when I was getting ready to, kind of my last preparation for this lesson, I got started, and guess what? When I got started, let me tell you what I didn't have. I didn't have experience. I didn't have knowledge. I did not have a model. I did not have a mentor. I did not have a plan. I did not have a fellow traveler. I did not have resources. I did not have money. I did not have a growth environment. But I got started. You don't stop or not start because of what you don't have. You don't start because you don't realize yet that the fruit of everything good in life begins with a challenge. There's nothing easy in life, worthwhile in life. Everything is uphill that's worthwhile. And it's not going to come to you, and it's not going to fall in your lap, and it's not going to be something that, oh my gosh, it just was so simple. It's always going to be difficult. So how do we go from growth doesn't just happen to making growth happen? Now, here's the practic, and you just don't want to miss this because I'm going to give you some stuff right now. This is pure gold, okay? This is so good, I hardly want to give it to you. And the reason I hardly want to give it to you is because it's so good, I don't want you to misuse it. So look at the person you're sitting beside and just say, take notes and don't mess up. Just tell them that. Just take notes and don't mess up, okay? I'm going to give you an intentional growth plan right now. It's just so simple. Let's go. Okay, here's my intentional growth plan. Number one, make a commitment to intentionally grow. That's where it starts. You say, well, John, that seems really simple. Make a commitment to intentionally grow. Guess what? It's really simple. But can I tell you something? When Kirk Kampmeyer looked across that breakfast table and told me that if I was going to grow, I was going to have to grow on purpose. And I looked at him and I said, I'm going to start growing on purpose. Something happened within me. Something happened within me that just changed my life. It was just a simple commitment. Nothing that I thought at that time was going to change my life, but it was just a simple commitment. I'm going to grow. I'm going to grow intentionally. And it starts there. I want every one of you. I want every one of you, for yourself, for the people that you lead, make that commitment to intentionally grow. Number 2, make that commitment public. A commitment that is not public is worthless. Because let me tell you something. We all have a tendency to stray. We all have a tendency to give up. We all have a tendency to get off course. Come on. But the moment that we start making it public, I can remember I couldn't afford that kit that I showed you. And I said, can you give me 30 minutes? And I lived where we were having our breakfast was close to the house. I said, I've got to show this. I got to take this and show it to Margaret. And I said, I ran home and I got to the kitchen table and I said, we can't afford this. It's $799 and we can't afford it. And so I've got to take it right back. But I just want to show you what we're going to save our money for. And we got it all out and got those cassettes out, and we looked at the material real quickly, and I put it back in the box, and I went back there. But then I told my friends, I began telling my friends, guess what? I've made a commitment to personally grow. There's something beautiful about a shared commitment. A shared commitment becomes a strong commitment. Number 3. Identify the areas that you want to grow personally in. Identify them. In other words, sit down and say, okay, where am I going to grow specifically? Now, I'm going to help you here. When you start identifying the areas that you're going to grow in, it should be at least 2 and no more than 5. 5's probably a little heavy. But it has to be at least 2. You say, well, how about just focusing on 1? Let me tell you why. You want to grow in an area of choice, and you want to grow in an area of skill. So that's 2. So when I'm talking about an area of choice, I'm talking about maybe your attitude. That's a choice, isn't it? So I want to grow in an area of choice. Maybe it's discipline. And I want to grow in an area of skill. So for me, I started off with attitude and speaking because I was speaking. I was a pastor. I want to be a better communicator. So I said, okay, speaking, that's a skill. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on my attitude. So identify what are the 2 areas at least that you're going to grow in. And then number 4, invest 1 hour a day in those 2 areas. Every day, including Sundays. Every day, 7 days, 7/24, 7. Every day. Okay, and when you spend that hour, I'm going to even tell you how to spend the hour. You spend the hour this way. Here's the way it works. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. Preparation, practice, reflection. You do it every day. Whether it's your choice or whether it's your skill. You prepare a little bit, practice a little bit, reflect a little bit. Every day. You're going to find this is just huge for your life. Now, while I was doing all of that preparation, practice, reflection, while I was doing all that on my speaking, I was starting to go observe communicators. And when I would listen to somebody speak, I wouldn't listen too much about what the subject was. It really didn't matter. I was asking myself one question the whole time I would listen to them speak, and the question was, are they connecting with their audience? And I would write down, if they were not connecting, why they were not, and if they were connecting, why they were. In about 2 years, I became a master in understanding how to connect with an audience. Because I studied it, and I would listen, and I would watch, and I would observe, and I would come away and say, they did 3 things that were just powerful. Okay, I got to go practice that. Okay, prepare, practice, reflect. And I would just work on that. And this is the cycle that I worked, okay? Number 5, invest 1 hour a week on reflection and writing on what you're learning. To take an hour every week and say, okay, for the last 7 days, this is what I've been practicing, this is what I've been preparing for, this is what I've been reflecting, and start that. Now let me tell you the secret on this. Because I'm kind of now talking about writing, I'm talking about maybe journaling a little bit. Let me tell you something. Don't try to journal a lot. Start with jotting. Jot before you journal. See, I jot every day. I don't journal every day, but I jot every day. 4 or 5 words. Oh my gosh, they're just mental kicks for me, okay? And then at the end of the week, you may have like 12 jots down. You with me? And you go get those jots, and you say, okay, now I'm going to spend 35 minutes. I'm going to start writing. What did that mean to me? Just jot and then journal. And then number 7, this is huge. No, I'm sorry. And then number 6, share your growth with someone. Every week, find somebody that you can share your growth with. And let me tell you how this works. You sit down with, I want to tell you what I'm learning. I want to tell you how I'm growing. Now, here's how this works. This is beautiful. When you share your growth with someone, if they're happy, do it the next week. You with me? Oh, okay. Well, let me share. Can I share with you now? See, so if they're happy, keep sharing. If they're not happy, start moving. Don't ever spend time with people that aren't thrilled with your progress. The friends I dropped in my early years were those people that weren't thrilled with my progress. Are you with me? They weren't thrilled at all with my progress. Those are the ones I left behind. I got some new friends. That's what you've got to do. Because let me tell you something. If you become intentional in your growth, you'll outgrow almost everybody you know.
Well, hey, podcast listeners, this is Richard Chansey. I've got my partner in crime, Mark Cole, the CEO of John Maxwell Enterprises today. Mark,
hey, welcome, buddy. Welcome to you. It's good to be with you. It's good to be talking about intentionality. It's good to be connecting with our friends and family in podcast land.
Yeah, and as we're recording this, we're right at a year of having done this together, and the response has just been amazing. In fact, you talk about
2.3 million impacts. My friend, a year ago, if you'd have told me we were going to have that privilege, and hey, the kudos go to really all of you listening. You keep coming back, hoping Richard and I'll get better. John's good, but they keep coming back for me and you, Richard, to hope we get better. And secondly, you're just passing it along. You're telling other people to listen, and you're subscribing. That's all the teacher pets out there. The teacher's pets are the ones that are actually subscribing to the podcast. And Richard, it's been a great year.
Yeah, and for us, we get to come into the studio and sit down and really analyze how we're doing as leaders. Before we jump on and start sharing with you how to put the wheels on this, we sit here and go, man, am I doing that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm doing that part.
And to be honest with you, now that you said that, it's funny. It's the first time I ever thought about that. I would have done a lot better in school if my teachers would have let me fill out my own report card. My parents would have been a lot more impressed. And so now that I'm thinking about it, you and I are assessing how well we're applying John's content, and we sound pretty good.
Oh, I know. And in fact, when I was driving over here today, I was thinking, boy, I need this today.
Yeah.
I need the teaching to be able to sit down and think through, how we're doing this. In fact, some of this is directly related to one of our leader core processes we did. I think it was the first one where we talked about having two areas that you're working on, a choice and a skill. With that being said, Mark, let's dive in. And again, this is the practical part of the podcast, kids. So what we're going to do right here is Mark and I are going to have a conversation about how do we put wheels on this? Because as a leader in this organization, Mark, as the guy that's at the very top of the day-to-day process, how are you being intentional? I mean, like practically, what do you do to be intentional about the areas that you need to grow in?
Well, I've talked, the crazy thing is I think about over the last year, how much have we mentioned growth? How many times have we talked about personal growth, intentionality of growth? How many times perhaps as John talked about Kurt Kampmeyer like he did just now and talked about a personal growth plan for him? How many times have you heard John say in the past year on podcast, growth is not automatic? And I thought, maybe there's nothing new for you listening to the podcast today, but maybe a good reminder is what we all need. And that is growth matters. I was struck as I was listening to this because much like John, I came into a growth environment when I started the John Maxwell Company, which was called Enjoy, almost 20 years ago now. And I came into a growth environment. I was a pretty avid reader. I was really intentional myself, but this growth environment took me to the next level. And I've shared my story a lot of times here, but I'm sitting here across from you, or standing here across from you today, Richard. I'm speaking into this microphone because of intentionality on personal growth. I guarantee it. I was telling Jason, Jake, you, Richard, before we cut the mics on, I believe with all of my heart that my greatest passion personally in everything I've learned from John is the lesson of intentionality on personal growth. It was an interesting day for me when I was 45 and I was reviewing my 12-year life plan that I had set 12 years prior at 33. It was inspired by this environment. Richard, you were sitting by my side in Cuba land back then. And I started a 12-year plan on intentionality growing. And I've talked about it here. I accomplished 84% of audacious goals, 42 of them. And at 45, I had an interesting question to answer. Am I done growing, or is there more left to grow? Is there more left to do? And I'm going to tell you, just for all of us, no matter how old you are, no matter how accomplished you are listening to the podcast today, you need to still be growing. Answer this question right here and now. Maybe even pause the podcast and answer this question. What are you doing to develop yourself right now? What are you doing? And if you can't quickly answer that question, you need to quit listening, stop, and I want you to keep listening to our podcast, but you need to stop listening and you need to start doing, because you need to be able to answer the question, what are you doing to develop yourself right now?
I feel like I should move into a meditation right now.
Maybe
so
you and I
people
should
can
pause it.
close your eyes while you're driving down the road. I think that's a good point, though, Mark. If you can't specifically, John called us out. He said you should be growing in 2 to 5 areas. Specifically, what are those areas for you? And if you don't have a word for those areas, that's a pretty good indication that you don't have a specific plan for growth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about that. Okay, what if Richard puts me on the spot? Because I'm not only your sidekick and a partner in crime. You love to put me on the spot with a microphone live. And I went, okay, Richard's going to ask me, what are the 2 areas? And I really do have an answer for those. One is as a businessman. I don't have a business degree like most of the people that have the responsibility that I have, 6 multi-million-dollar companies that I oversee. A lot of people have a business degree with that. That's not my educational background. The other thing that I'm really trying to grow in addition to being a businessman and learning and growing, is my speaking. John is more and more throwing the microphone at me for doing some relief work or some come in and show how we're living it out. And me is stepping on John Maxwell's stage, holding his microphone and trying to communicate. And so for the last year and a half, I have worked diligently, much like John shared in the lesson today. I've worked diligently on my communication. We may get into that a little bit more, but there's my 2 areas.
Yeah. So
business leadership and communicating on a stage as big as John Maxwell's.
Yeah. So let's pull them apart a little bit, because I think that's the practical part of this. On the business leadership, what are you doing? What happens this week? How do you get ready for this week? Practically, how do you keep it on the forefront of your mind? Because a lot of leadership is, how do you respond?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, as good as a communicator as John Maxwell is, John's brother, Larry Maxwell, is that good in business. I mean, he is one of the best business leaders I know. Very, very successful in the banking, mortgage, commercial real estate business. And he's a mentor of mine. In fact, he's helping me with a merger acquisition right now as we speak. And I jump on a plane tomorrow evening to London. I've got some work to do there, and I land and go straight into a meeting with Larry Maxwell this coming Saturday morning. Well, all week long, every available moment, I'm getting my stuff together. I'm preparing extra hard because I'm going into the presence of a very astute business person. And I don't want to just ask mediocre questions, because mediocre questions asked of an expert is going to still get mediocre answers. But a great question will get a great answer because it's in his tank. I just need to pull it out on how best to construct this deal. So to answer your question, preparation, I'm aware that I'm not experienced in business acumen, in business mergers, acquisitions. I'm aware of that. So I prepare extra hard for meetings like this. And secondly, I've done all of my homework to make sure I know what we need to discuss. And finally, I work hard on asking great questions, not good questions, great questions, so that I'll walk out of Saturday's meeting much more equipped to make business decisions I've got to make.
Yeah, and the thing I want to point out right there is it's very relevant to what's coming up.
Yeah.
So you're not, and see, I think a lot of times people are just studying leadership, or they're just studying business, or they're just studying communicating, but they don't have a specific thing they've got to communicate, or a specific thing they have to lead, or a specific thing that they've got in business. So I think getting hyper-focused on what's coming, what's most relevant. I call it just-in-time learning. What's relevant to where you are.
Well, and what's interesting is I'm talking about a business decision I've got to make that pales in comparison to what others make. In fact, I'll reference my friend, my mentor, a board member of our nonprofit, Ed Bastian. He's CEO of Delta Airlines. And within the last year, he became CEO from president. And he said the greatest thing that he had to do different as CEO from being president was he had to think about the future. Now, this is a guy running one of the largest companies in the world, and he is having to intentionally challenge himself and grow with the next level of responsibilities. And so many times, you know what we do? You know what I do? Maybe not everybody listening to Podcast Land, but when we finally reach that final advancement, we become the CEO or we become the entrepreneur that now owns our own business, we stop challenging ourselves to intentionally grow. I can tell you, whether it's Ed Bastian, whether it's Larry Maxwell, whether it's Peon Mark Cole, or whether it's John Maxwell, there is still an intentionality on growing no matter the level of accomplishment or the level of success.
Yeah, and I hear it all the time, people saying, what got you here won't get you there. So I think the practical application to take away from this, if you're listening right now, is what have you been doing that has worked really well that you've got to stop doing or hand off so that you can do whatever it's going to take you to the next level. If you're not thinking about the future, how do you free up time to think about the future?
Yeah, and John talked about several gaps, but one of them that he talked about was the assumption gap. That's assuming we will grow automatically. And we listen to podcasts, we listen to Minute with Maxwell, we get around people that are growth oriented and we think growth just happens. And while that is creating an environment for growth, to really get the ROI on personal investment, it needs to have the word intentionality. Going back to what are you doing to develop yourself right now? I love that you're listening to the podcast. It will help you. But what are you doing because you're listening to the podcast? Don't just listen while you're driving down the road for Richard and I and John to keep you company. What are you doing with what you're learning? It's why, John challenged us this episode. John Maxwell challenged us. He said, guys, I'm going to talk about how I invested in myself. You need to challenge the people in podcast land to ask the question, how are they developing themselves? That's why, Richard, if you'll just allow me, this is a shameless plug, but we developed a digital product on the 15 laws of growth. It's incredible. It's John Maxwell teaching. It's a 12 or 13 week episode that John teaches. Oh no, it's 15 or 16 weeks to where John teaches on the 15 laws of growth by video and then challenges you in each session to do something with it. And so I think it's retail at $699, but John challenged us to challenge you to say you need to have an intentional decision on growing yourself. So grab your pen, grab your paper, because I'm going to tell you how you can get this retail $699 for $149 by listening to this podcast. Go to johnmaxwell.com/15 laws. It'll ask you for a code, type in podcast, PODCAST, and that will get you that $149 price point. And that's in perpetuity. You may be listening to this a year after we record this, you'll still get a chance to do it. And so I just wanted to put that in because, again, don't make it the assumption gap that you will grow automatically. You're going to have to invest in yourself to grow.
Yeah, and let me raise you one.
Okay.
So in addition to that, it is 15 laws with the number 15 and then laws. Also, two of the things that John talked about, what's your intentional plan to develop yourself? And what are you doing to develop others? this is a way that you can do that. This is something that you can use with your team, and you guys can all grow together. It also hits number 6 is share your growth with somebody.
Yeah.
Share what you're trying, make a commitment, and then make that commit public. This is an opportunity to have a self-guided tour for that.
You know, John makes a point in the teaching today. He said, everything you want is dependent on you growing yourself. So think about it. What's your dream? What's your aspiration? What makes you sing? What makes you think? What makes you dream? What makes you cry? What are those passion answers to those passion questions? And John comes back and says, growth is a guarantee to accomplish those things. Everything you want is dependent on you growing yourself. You don't wake up one day. I did not wake up as CEO. I pinch myself every single day of my life at what I get to do and who I get to do it with. But let me tell you something. I'm not surprised. I've worked very diligently for where I am. You, Richard, you've worked very diligently for what you have, what you get to do. The guys in the studio today, there's no surprises to accomplishment. There's a lot of intentionality. Now, should we all be awed at what we get to do? Yes, you betcha. But we should not be surprised because it's on the back of hard work and intentionality.
It really is, Mark. And I know I'm more wired. You know, the call of my heart is I want to help other people. But I love what John says here. You can't give what you don't have. Think about it for a minute about the person that is trying to give what they don't have. What goes through your mind when you look at somebody that's teaching something they don't know how to do?
Yeah, you don't believe it.
It's not authentic, right? We want to be authentic leaders, and to be able to lead people at the next level, we've got to go to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, the second thing that John and I have been trying to grow in is this speaking. So we talked about businessman and being a better business leader. But the second thing that I am really working hard on is my speaking. And John talks about the intentional growth plan. And Richard, you may want to go deep in these 6 points that John made, but he says, make a commitment to grow. That's the first thing. But the second thing is just as important. Make that commitment public. I'll never forget, 4 years ago, I made a commitment out loud to people that I was going to work on my speaking. Now, first of all, there was a great sigh of relief because I was terrible. And so people were like, oh, finally. But really, here's why I did that. And the last 4 years of going through this sometimes has been painful, embarrassing, and a bit excruciating. Because you know the people that says, oh, God bless his soul, God help him. I've heard all of those things audible. As I consciously lived out, I am trying to get better. And again, think about getting better while John Maxwell is the forefront and you're standing in the shadow. But I made that decision. I'm going to make it public. I'll tell you, just this morning, the day that we're recording this podcast, I did a bunch of video stuff. And Jason Brooks, who's in the studio, he's director of all of our content, runs our publishing imprint. Jason's in there and he said, Mark, I got to tell you something. He said, do you remember a few years ago when you did the 21 Laws video curriculum and you did it? And I said, and I kind of hung my head and said, yeah. He said, trust me, today was so much better. Well, what Jason was kind of saying was you were terrible then and today you're kind of getting a little bit better. But I'm just kidding. You know what Jason knew? And he's nodding his head. Yes, that is what he said.
He's a word man.
Yes, he's
a man with words.
The sad part about what I just said is he's nodding his head. Yes, that was what he was saying. But here's what Jason was saying. Mark, I've heard you publicly say you want to get better. Now let me give you some affirmation that you are getting better. I wouldn't have got the affirmation if I would not made the commitment public. And I probably wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't went public with that.
Yeah, so let me mention 3 things that you just hit right there and recap them. Number 1, you can make a commitment. You're listening to this right now. You can make that commitment right now. What are you committing to? What are you going to grow in? One skill, one choice. Who you're going to call and tell them about it right now. And put some skin in the game. Don't call somebody you went to high school with, you haven't talked in 30 years and say, I'm going to become a better speaker. Talk to somebody that's going to impact, that's going to make their life better, you getting better in that area. Hey, don't forget, you can get the bonus video by visiting maxwellpodcast.com/intention and click the bonus resource button. We also have a link there to the 15 Laws of Growth that Mark mentioned earlier, the online course, where you can use the promo code podcast to get that $699 resource for just $149. Mark, thanks so much for being with us today.
Absolutely.
We all know John Maxwell is the authority on leadership, but did you know John credits personal growth as the key to his success? It's true. John says that the overwhelming success he's experiencing today is the result of his commitment to an intentional growth plan. Now, John's personal growth was old school. We're talking tape decks and a 1980 Pontiac Bonneville old school, but the principles remain the same. Investing in yourself a little bit every day leads to major growth. That's why John developed the 15 Laws of Growth online course. It's a fully online, intensive growth plan to help you reach your peak potential, featuring lifetime access to videos from John, as well as ready-made notes and applications. This intensive course will help you learn the pathway of growth, target and develop your key areas for growth, and intentionally map your growth over time. The full course retails for $699, but as a friend of the Maxwell Leadership Podcast, you can access the course for just $149 with the code PODCAST. Check it out and claim your special enrollment rate at johnmaxwell.com/15 laws.